The Sovereign Hotel smelled like power. Not metaphorically. There was a real, specific scent to it, cool marble and hothouse lilies and aged leather and the faint trace of money that has been money long enough to stop trying to smell like anything. Harlow had catalogued that smell over 2 years of 5:45 a.m. buses and pressed uniforms and late nights counting tips that didn't add up to what her mother needed. She belonged here. She had to keep reminding herself of that. It was a Tuesday in November. The kind of Tuesday that forgot to tell the city it wasn't supposed to matter. The Grand Ballroom had been reserved for 3 days, a corporate summit for Kong Meridian Group, one of the most quietly powerful conglomerates working across 4 continents. Harlow had read the briefing. She always read the briefing. She knew Kong Meridian's portfolio the way she knew her section, completely, practically, and with the awareness that the information might matter at a moment nobody could schedule. And at the center of it all, one man. The convoy arrived at 7:04 p.m. 3 black SUVs. Choreographed. The lobby shifted the way it always shifted when real power walked in, not dramatically, but the way a room does when the barometric pressure changes. People found reasons to look at clipboards. Blair Ashworth materialized from nowhere, adjusting his cuffs. Marin appeared at Harlow's shoulder. "Here we go," she said. "Easy," Harlow said. $50,000 a night for the suite, and he tips in acknowledgement nods. Marin. "I'm just saying." The doors opened. Dashiell Kong walked in the way he always walked into rooms, without announcing himself, which was somehow louder than announcing himself. He was in conversation with Dawn, his eyes moving across the space in a single quiet scan. Sullivan, his head of security, walked half a step behind and to the right. 2 additional security personnel flanked the perimeter. Harlow watched him. She watched everyone. It was professional. Necessary. The job. That was what she told herself. She was carrying a silver tray of canapés toward the registration corridor when it happened. A passing guest stepped back without looking, grazed the edge of the tray. A small porcelain ramekin skated toward the marble edge of the console table, and Harlow's hand was already there. One hand. Clean catch. No spill. She straightened. Looked up. Dashiell Kong had stopped. Not for long. A half-second pause that no one else would have noticed. His eyes moved to her face. Harlow met his gaze. Not because she was bold. Because she had decided, somewhere in year 2 of this job, that she was done preemptively apologizing with her eyes to men who had not earned her apology. Something moved in his expression. Unnameable. Brief. Then Dawn said something quiet in his ear, and he walked on. Marin materialized at her elbow again. "He looked at you. He looked at the tray. Harlow. That man has never looked at staff. Like, physically. His eyes go over us like furniture." Harlow set the tray down and straightened a napkin that did not need straightening. "Then I must have been an interesting piece of furniture today." And that was the moment everything changed. But what neither of them knew, was what Dashiell Kong had left on the lobby floor when his convoy moved through. Small. Black. About the size of a pen. A voice recorder. The only copy. Unencrypted, unshared, deliberately isolated to protect its chain of custody. Containing 42 minutes of a conversation that could either resurrect his empire, or finally destroy the man who had been dismantling it from the inside for 3 years. Harlow found it during the turndown service check at 9:17 p.m. She almost walked past it. The orchid arrangement above cast the console's base in shadow. She thought it was a pen, reached for it, turned it over in her palm, noticed the small red indicator light, dormant but present. Not a pen. A recorder. She should have taken it to the front desk immediately. She would have. Except that her thumb, out of the same instinct that made her read every briefing, memorize every room layout, catch falling things before they hit the floor, pressed the small playback button. And she heard a voice she did not recognize. Smooth. Unhurried. The voice of a man who had spent decades making catastrophic things sound reasonable. The Meridian acquisition is a problem. Devereux Asset Management needs the Solvano deal dead. If Kang's infrastructure contract goes through, we're exposed on 3 fronts. Accelerate the timeline on the Cartwright disclosure. Plant what needs to be planted. Start with the mid-level people, the accountants. Nobody cares about accountants. Harlow's thumb went still. Nobody cares about accountants. Her brother Crosby was an accountant. Was. Before he was arrested on a financial fraud charge 18 months ago. Before the family spent everything trying to prove the evidence was planted. Before Eloan stopped sleeping. Before Harlow took a second job at a hotel that smelled like power, to pay for a lawyer who kept filing motions that kept getting denied. She stood in that corridor and played the next 30 seconds. If the Cartwright audit gets flagged, we need a human anchor. Someone internal. Mid-level. No political connections, no expensive lawyers. Someone who looks guilty enough that no one looks further. The accountant. Cross. Flag the discrepancies in his file. Give him enough rope. Cross. Crosby's nickname. His entire Cartwright team called him Cross. She stood in that corridor for 47 seconds. She counted them. She couldn't have said why. Then she slipped the recorder into the inner pocket of her uniform jacket. Pressed it flat against her ribs. And finished her shift. She told herself she was going to turn it in. Not to the front desk. She wasn't naive, the front desk would return it directly to his room, and whatever was on it would be gone, and Crosby would still be in Joliet. She needed to understand what she had first. She needed to know if the voice was who she thought it was. She went home and listened to all 42 minutes. 42 minutes. Archer Devereux, she confirmed the name in the second act of the recording, methodically instructing someone to fabricate regulatory disclosures designed to destroy Kong Meridian's infrastructure bid. Naming 3 companies as anchor cases. Naming a senior accountant at one of them, Cartwright Capital, as the designated fall figure. Naming her brother by a nickname only his co-workers used. She didn't cry. She made a list. Then she called her mother. Eloan's voice on the phone was careful now, always careful, like someone walking across ice, never committing their full weight to any single step. Did you eat today, baby? I ate. How was the call with the lawyer? A pause waited by months. He says the appeal has a better chance if we can find any procedural irregularity in how the audit was sourced. Any anomaly at all. Eloan paused. He says it's a long shot. Mama. I know. What if it wasn't a long shot anymore? Silence. The kind that only a mother produces, the particular silence of someone choosing whether to hope, because hope, at a certain cost, becomes a kind of danger. Harlow. What did you find? I'm working on it, she said. I need a few more days. She'd never said that before. I'm working on it. She hadn't known she was working on anything until tonight. The second day of the summit, Dashiell Kong stopped her in the mezzanine corridor. Not dramatically. He came around the corner from the business center. She came from the service wing. And for the second time in 2 days, she was the one who moved first, one smooth step to the side, avoiding the collision with unhurried grace. He stopped. You were working the lobby yesterday evening, he said. Not a question. I was. You caught the porcelain piece. It seemed like it wanted to fall. Something moved in his expression. The ghost of something, not quite a smile, more like the suggestion of one having briefly considered arriving. Have you found a pen? He asked. Small. Black. It may have been near the east console. I'll check lost and found, she said. We have a thorough process. I'm sure you do. His voice was careful. If it were found, it would be important that it was returned through direct channels. Not the general desk. Understood, she said. She walked away, feeling his eyes on her back for exactly 4 steps. He started looking for her. By day 2, afternoon, she was certain of it. A man with Dashiell Kang's schedule does not drift toward service corridors. He does not linger near the staff-accessible east staircase. Twice that afternoon she caught him in a corridor where no meeting existed on his itinerary. Marin caught it too. He's looking for you. He's looking for his recorder. Harlow. All humor gone from Marin's voice. Do you have his recorder? A silence. Oh my God. Keep your voice down. What is on it? The reason my brother is in prison. Marin was quiet for a long moment. What are you going to do? I need to understand exactly what I'm holding. And then I'm going to use it. Harlow, Marin lowered her voice further. That man's lawyers eat other lawyers. If he thinks you took his property. I didn't steal it. I found it. Possession is 9/10 of everything in his world, and you are standing on the other 10th. You need to understand something. Marin looked at her steadily. If you go up against Archer Devereux, he is going to come for the things you love. That is how he works. Not the person. The things around the person. Your job. Your mother's house. Crosby's appeal. She paused. Are you ready for that? Harlow looked at the lobby beyond the service door. The chandeliers burning. The marble reflecting everything. I've been careful my whole life, she said, quietly. Crosby has been careful his whole life. Careful didn't keep him out of Joliet. Marin reached out and squeezed her hand. Then tell me what I can do. That night, Harlow did what she did when she needed to think clearly. She researched. She found Dashiell Kang's public record, the business filings, the investigative profiles, the shadow of accusation that followed a man whose empire had grown in spaces between 2 worlds. She weighed it all honestly. She was not naive. But she also found something else. 3 years ago, Kong Meridian had submitted a $2.4 billion infrastructure bid for the redevelopment of the South Side. Public transit. Affordable housing. A community health corridor serving 4 of the most underserved zip codes in Illinois. The bid had been killed. Killed by a regulatory investigation opened by Devereux Asset Management's lobbying arm. An investigation built on fabricated disclosures from 3 companies, including Cartwright Capital. And then she found something that made her set the laptop down and sit with her hands flat on the table for a very long time. A photograph. 3 years old. Dashiell Kang at a Chicago Tribune Community Board event, shaking hands with a South Side alderman. He looked younger. Less armored. Like someone who still believed the meeting would matter. Behind him in the photograph, barely visible, a young Korean woman in hotel staff uniform. Serving drinks. Head down. Invisible in the amber light. The caption on the photograph did not name her. Harlow looked at that photograph for a long time. She had a feeling she couldn't explain yet. On the 3rd morning of the summit, he came directly to her. Not accidentally. He walked to the mezzanine where she was folding linen as if he had been told exactly where she was, which he probably had. He sat down at the small side table near the window, the corner one, where the November city stretched out gray and honest. The recorder wasn't in Lost and Found, he said. We check twice daily. Some items appear on the second pass. Harlow. He said her name quietly. She didn't remember telling him her name, which meant Dawn had sourced it. I need you to understand what it is you found. I need you to understand something first, she said. He waited. Cartwright Capital. 3 years ago. The regulatory investigation that killed your infrastructure bid. A senior accountant was named as the internal fraud anchor. His file was flagged. He was prosecuted. His nickname was Cross. She kept her voice level. She had practiced this for 2 nights. His name is Darian Cross. His actual name is Crosby. He is my brother. He has been in Joliet Correctional for 18 months. Dashiell Khan went absolutely still. Not with suspicion. Not with calculation. With the specific, bone-deep stillness of a man watching something arrive from a direction he hadn't prepared for. "You found the recorder," he said. "Yes." "And you listened." "Yes." "And you recognized the name." "Yes." The November city was gray and quiet outside. Somewhere below, a delivery truck was backing up. The ordinary world continued. "The voice on the recording," he said. "You know whose it is." "I know whose it is." Another silence. He looked at her with an expression she hadn't seen on him before. Something unguarded. Something that cost him. "You could have gone straight to an attorney," he said. "Someone representing your brother. This recording, authenticated, is direct exculpatory evidence. You didn't need me to do that." "No," she said. "I didn't. So why are you here, telling me this?" She looked at him directly. "Because I heard what the recording says Devereux did to your bid, too. Because 4,700 housing units on the south side are still waiting. And because whatever you're planning to do with that recording, I want to know that Crosby is part of the plan. Not an afterthought. Not collateral benefit." She paused. "A named priority." He looked at her for a long time. "I've had 17 lawyers on this case for 3 years," he said. "Investigators. Forensic accountants. Nobody found Cartwright. Nobody was looking for it from Crosby's direction," she said. "They were looking for your problem. Not mine." Something moved across his face. Deep and quiet and slightly undone. "I need to make some calls," he said. "I know." He started to stand. Then he stopped. He sat back down. And he did something that surprised her. He said, "I need to tell you something. Before we go further. Because if we go further, you deserve to know why this is not just business to me." She waited. He looked at the window. At the city. At something she couldn't see. "My sister," he said. Her name was Jay. She was 24. She was working at a hotel in Seattle, a place not entirely unlike this one, when she discovered her manager was processing fraudulent invoices. Systematically. For years. She reported it. He paused. A controlled pause that was doing a great deal of work. Her manager had already spoken to the right people before her report was filed. By the time the investigation concluded, she was the one under review for financial misconduct. Her H-1B visa was tied to her employment. When she was terminated, she had 30 days to leave the country. Harlow did not move. "She went back to Seoul," he said. "She had a health condition. Something manageable, here, with consistent care. Less manageable without it." Another pause. "She died 14 months after she was deported." He turned from the window. She was 26 years old. She had done everything right. She was careful, and honest, and she reported what she saw because she believed that was what you were supposed to do. He met Harlow's eyes. "I have spent 15 years building something large enough that what happened to GA could not happen to someone in my organization. That no one I was responsible for would be invisible enough to be destroyed without anyone noticing." He stopped. "And then Devereux did exactly what was done to her, to an accountant at one of my partner companies, and I didn't notice. For 3 years, I didn't notice Crosby." The lobby below murmured distantly. Harlow looked at the man across the small table from her. She was looking at a wound. Not scar tissue. An open wound, carefully dressed, that he had been carrying inside a tailored suit for 15 years. What was she like? Harlow said. He looked up. Slightly startled. No one had ever asked him that. She could see it. She laughed too loud, he said. At everything. It was embarrassing in restaurants. A pause. She would have liked you. If you've ever watched someone fight a system designed to erase them, a system with money, lawyers, and time on its side, this story is for you. Hit subscribe. Stay with us. Because what happens next is the reason this story exists. He stood, adjusted his jacket, and said, "What's your phone number?" She told him. "Ronan, my legal director, will contact you within the hour. He's going to need everything you can give him about Crosby's case timeline. Every document. Every attorney correspondence. Everything." "I have it all," she said. "I've had it all organized for 18 months. He nodded. Once. He started to walk away. Stopped. Turned back. "For the record," he said. "My name is Dashiell. Not Mr. Khan. Not in this conversation." She held his gaze. "I know," she said. "Archer Devereux arrived on Thursday. Not on the summit guest list. Side entrance. His own car. The kind of entrance used by people who know hotels well enough to move through them without being logged." Harlow saw him from the second-floor mezzanine. She recognized him immediately from her research, the silver hair, the patrician face, the smile that arrived 2 seconds before any genuine emotion could. He spoke briefly with Blair Ashworth in the back corridor. Blair's posture changed. Not dramatically. The particular change that happens when a person remembers exactly where their salary comes from. She texted Dashiell. "Devereux in the building. Side entrance. Just met with Blair. Don't let him see you clock him." "I mean that." She looked at those 3 words. "I mean that." Not arrogant. Urgent. He knew how Devereux worked. He was trying to protect her. She went back to work. She refilled water glasses. She carried linen. She smiled at guests who looked through her. She did her job. At 11:47 p.m., she rode the bus home to her apartment in Rogers Park. She turned her key in the lock. The door opened. And she knew something was wrong before she stepped inside, the way you know before the smell and before the visual, when the air of a room you've lived in for 2 years tells you, quietly but absolutely, that something in it has changed. She stepped inside. Turned on the light. A man was sitting at her kitchen table. Slight. Ordinary looking. Dark jacket. He was holding a cup of tea he'd made himself, as though he'd been invited. "Miss Harlow," he said. "I'm Bowden. Please close the door." Harlow did not run. She closed the door. She set her bag on the hook beside it, the same hook she used every night, and she turned to face the man at her table. "You're going to want to leave," she said. "Before I call the police." "We both know you're not going to call the police," he said. Not threatening. Just accurate. The way a dentist says this might sting. "Please sit down." She did not sit down. "You found something," Bowden said. "Something that belongs to an associate of the man I work for. Mr. Devereux wants you to understand a few things." He set down his tea. "First, your brother. Darian Cross, currently at Joliet. His appeal is in the early stages. Appeals can be helped or they can be complicated. Paperwork gets delayed. Character witnesses become unavailable. Parole eligibility reviews get flagged for secondary screening." He said it conversationally. "These things happen." Harlow's hands were flat at her sides. "Second, your mother. Eloan. She's in the Calumet City house. 31 years she's been there. The mortgage is current, but she's behind on the second lien. Those things can be called in the right circumstances. A small pause. Or they can be not noticed, in the right circumstances. The apartment was very quiet. Third, your position at the Sovereign. Mr. Ashworth is in the process of completing a review of staff access. Depending on what that review finds, termination without reference is entirely possible. He looked at her. None of this has to happen. Mr. Devereux is a reasonable man. He is simply asking that what was lost be returned, through channels that preserve everyone's interests, and that the matter be considered concluded. Harlow looked at the man at her kitchen table. She looked at her mother's fabric softener on the shelf above the washer in the corner. She looked at the graduation photograph of Crosby pinned to the refrigerator with a magnet from Navy Pier. And then she looked back at Bowden. "Finished?" she said. He blinked. He hadn't expected that word. "I want you out of my apartment," she said. "Right now." "Miss Harlow." "You're in my home," she said. And her voice was completely level. "You came into my home while I was at work. You made tea in my kitchen. And you sat at my table and threatened my mother and my brother." She took one step forward. "I heard you. Now get out." He stood slowly. He set the mug in the sink with a deliberateness that was its own message. "Mr. Devereux will want an answer," he said. "He has it," she said. She held the front door open until he was through it. Then she locked it. Then she sat down on her kitchen floor, not the chair, the floor, and put her back against the cabinet and breathed for 30 seconds. 30 seconds. Then she picked up her phone and called Dashiell. He answered on the first ring. "Are you safe?" "Someone was in my apartment," she said. "His name was Bowden. He works for Devereux." "I know who Bowden is." His voice had changed entirely. All the controlled composure was still there, but underneath it, something live and reactive she hadn't heard from him before. "Are you hurt?" "No. He sat in my kitchen and made tea and threatened my family." A pause. He was very polite about it. A silence on his end. Not empty, dense. "Harlow." His voice was careful in the way of someone choosing each word for weight. "I need you to go somewhere that isn't your apartment tonight. Is there somewhere safe?" "Marin's," she said. "Go there now. Don't take a car service, take the train. Sullivan is going to be outside Marin's building within the hour. In the morning, I need you to meet me. You don't get to tell me what. I'm not telling you what to do. Quiet. Direct. I'm asking. Please. Let me do something about this." She leaned her head against the cabinet. Through the window, the city moved. Indifferent. Busy. Full of people who had no idea that a woman was sitting on her kitchen floor having discovered, tonight, the exact texture of what it felt like to be considered expendable. "All right," she said. "Thank you," he said. She had never heard him say thank you like that before. Not the hotel version. Not the refilled coffee version. This was a different kind. The next morning, she met him at the restaurant on Wabash. He was already there. Not in the suit, dark sweater, dark trousers. The armor was off. Without it, he looked more like a person. Still carrying his particular gravity. But more like a person than she had seen him. He stood when she came in. She had noticed this the first time. That he stood. She was still deciding what to do with it. "Tell me everything," he said. "Everything," he said. She sat across from him and told him. All of it. Exactly. She did not soften it or organize it for palatability. She said it the way it had been, her apartment, the made tea, the quiet inventory of everything she loved being turned into leverage. When she finished, he was looking at the table. Not at her. At the table. And his hands, both of them, flat on the wood, were very, very still. He knows who Bowden is, he said finally. He sent him specifically because Bowden is clean. No prior record, no documented threat. Deniable. A pause. This is what he does to people who get close to the evidence. He doesn't touch them. He touches the things they can't afford to lose. Like GAS Visa, Harlow said. He looked up. Like GAS Visa, he said. What happened next moved faster than Harlow's plan had accounted for. Sullivan called at noon. Devereux himself is at the Sovereign. Suite 614. He's requested a meeting with hotel management regarding and I'm reading their words, ongoing compliance concern related to staff conduct. Dashiell went still across the table. He's not done with Blair, he said. He's going to try to get her terminated today. Before Ronan can file. Then I need to go back, Harlow said. Harlow. He is at my place of work. She stood. He sent a man to sit in my kitchen. And now he's at my hotel, using my hotel manager to do his work for him. I'm going back. And do what? She put on her coat. My job, she said. She arrived at the Sovereign at 12:47 p.m. She clocked in. Changed into her uniform in the locker room, pressed, as always, exactly as always, and walked out onto the floor. Marin intercepted her near the service station. He's up on 6. Blair has been in his office for 40 minutes with 2 of Devereux's people. I know. There's more. Marin's voice dropped. He's coming to the lobby. I heard it from the front desk. He asked for a table in the main room. He wants to be seen. By who? Marin looked at her. By you. Archer Devereux was at the corner table in the main dining room at 1:15 p.m. He was alone. No aide. No lawyer. A cup of coffee and a newspaper and the relaxed posture of a man who had never in his life been anywhere he wasn't supposed to be. Harlow came to his table. Good afternoon, she said. Can I get you anything? He looked up at her. The smile arrived. Practiced and warm. Everything perfectly calibrated. You must be Harlow, he said. She held his gaze. I am. Archer Devereux. Not offering his hand. Just his name, in the tone of someone who expects the name to do work. Sit down for a moment. I'm working, she said. Please. Still the smile. I'll only take a moment of your time. She didn't sit. She stood. Service posture, professional, upright, completely present. I understand you found something recently, he said. Something that might seem significant. I want you to know that I appreciate the difficult position that puts you in. He tilted his head. You're a smart woman. You understand the difference between a recording made out of context and a recording that accurately represents a situation. Are those different things? She said. In legal terms? Almost always. The smile didn't flicker. Context matters enormously. Tone matters. Conversations between colleagues in high-pressure industries often sound alarming when isolated. What seems like instruction is often strategy session. Hypothetical. He paused. I'm not here to threaten you, Harlow. I want you to understand that whatever you think you heard, there are people who will professionally and thoroughly dispute it. And the dispute will be very, very expensive. For everyone involved. She looked at him. She looked at the man who had sent Bowden to her kitchen. Who had sent her brother to Joliet. Who had taken 4,700 housing units off a community's map. Who was sitting in the Sovereign Hotel with a newspaper and a coffee and a smile, expecting her to be afraid. I appreciate the context, she said. Can I bring you anything else? The smile, for one fraction of a second, slipped. She saw what was underneath it. Cold. Precise. The expression of a man recalibrating. "No," he said. "Thank you." She walked away from Archer Devereux and did not look back. She texted Dashiell from the service corridor. He spoke to me directly. He used my first name. He offered context. The reply came in 30 seconds. "What did you say?" She almost smiled. "I asked if I could bring him anything else." A pause. Then. Harlow. Just her name. That was all. She put the phone back in her pocket and went back to work. Ronan filed the first motion at 4:30 that afternoon. Emergency motion to vacate, Darien Cross, Illinois Appellate Court, 2nd District. Grounds, new exculpatory evidence. Specifically, a voice recording authenticated by independent forensic analysis, demonstrating that the regulatory disclosure at Cartwright Capital had been deliberately engineered by a named party to target a specific employee. Additionally, timestamp discrepancies in Crosby's access credentials that directly contradicted the prosecution's timeline. The filing hit the docket at 4:47 p.m. By 5:15, Devereux's legal team had been notified. Marin, who had 3 alerts set on her phone, texted Harlow a single word. Filed. Harlow was on the service elevator when she read it. The elevator was functional and fluorescent and smelled like industrial cleaner. She pressed her back against the wall and closed her eyes. She let herself have 30 seconds of something she hadn't let herself have in 18 months. Then the doors opened and she went back to work. The Senate Commerce Committee hearing was scheduled for December 9. Dashiell had 2 weeks to prepare. 2 weeks during which the Devereux legal machine moved with the efficiency of something that had done this before, filing countermotions, requesting stays, issuing discovery demands designed to delay and exhaust. He met with Harlow 3 more times at the restaurant on Wabash. They stopped pretending the meetings were entirely about strategy by the second one. The third meeting, she brought Crosby's file, all of it, 18 months of organized documentation, in a manila folder. She set it on the table between them. He opened it. Read in silence for 20 minutes while she drank tea and watched the street. When he closed it, he looked up. Something behind his eyes that she hadn't seen before, not the wound exactly, something adjacent to it. Guilt. "I had people at Cartwright," he said. "They should have found this." "They weren't looking at Crosby," she said. "They should have been looking at everything." A pause. He was 24 when this happened. He was 24. "He looks like somebody's," he stopped. "He looks like somebody's little brother," she said quietly. "Because he is." Dashiell picked up the folder. "I'm going to say his name at the hearing," he said. "On the record. In the official testimony. I want it to be clear, not a footnote. A named priority. As you asked." She looked at him. "You said that like it was simple." "It's not simple," he said. "Naming him on the record means I am formally connecting my testimony to his appeal. Devereux's team will use that to argue coordination between our legal strategies. It will complicate both cases in the short term. The appellate process for Crosby could take an additional," he paused. "Ronan estimates it costs approximately 3 to 5 months. 3 to 5 months, she said. "Yes." "Of Crosby and Joliet." "Yes." She looked at the table. "But it's right," she said. "Yes," he said. "It's right." The deeper cost of the testimony was something he told her about on the last meeting before the hearing. To testify fully, to lay out the architecture of how his infrastructure bid had been killed, to name names, to provide the documented trail, he would have to disclose financial details of Kong Meridian he had kept private for reasons that were legitimate but that would, in congressional scrutiny, create penalties. Projects shelved. Deals walked away from. The gray territory of a business built between two worlds, in the years before he decided to pull it into the light. He named the estimated penalty range. She looked at him. That's not an abstract number, she said. No, he said. It isn't. You don't have to do this for the housing bid, she said. The recording and the forensic authentication are enough for Crosby. The bid can be resubmitted separately through clean channels after. The bid was the reason Devereux came after me in the first place, he said. If I testify without addressing the bid, he wins the original objective. Those communities are still waiting. He looked at her. G.A. wanted to work in hotel hospitality her whole life. She wanted to open a small restaurant eventually. She was good at reading what rooms needed. He stopped. There are 12 blocks on the south side where a community health facility was supposed to be built 3 years ago. People in those 12 blocks are taking 2 buses to get to a clinic. He looked at his hands. I am not going to let Devereux win the thing he actually wanted to win. Harlow was quiet for a long moment. You're going to testify and expose yourself and accept the penalties, she said. And you're going to resubmit the bid. And you're going to name my brother by name. And you're going to do all of that knowing it costs you, significantly. Yes. Dashiell. She said his name carefully. She didn't say it often. Why? He looked at her. Not the controlled look. Not the composed public face. The actual look. The one underneath. Because G.A. was 24, he said. And I was already building something by then. And I told myself it wasn't my responsibility to be everywhere. That I couldn't protect everyone. His voice was very quiet. I was in Seoul when she died. I got there 3 days later. And her apartment, he stopped. Started again. Her apartment was tidy. She had pressed her uniform for the next day. She pressed her uniform the day she died. Because that was who she was. She was careful. She was always careful. He looked at Harlow. You press your uniform every morning. She held very still. I noticed that, he said. The first morning. You came on shift and your uniform was, it was perfect. And I thought, he stopped. I thought of her. The restaurant was warm and quiet around them. She went home that night and stood in her bathroom. Her uniform hung on the hook behind the door. Navy and pressed and exact. She had pressed it at 5:30 a.m. this morning, the same as every morning. She put her hand on the fabric. She thought about a 26-year-old woman in Seattle pressing her uniform for a day she didn't reach. She thought about Crosby's DePaul graduation, grinning, holding the rolled diploma like it was proof of something. She thought about Dashiell Kong sitting before a Senate committee and naming her brother by name, and what that would cost him, and what it would cost her, and what it would cost the 3 to 5 months, and whether the right thing had always been the thing and she had just been waiting to understand what the right thing actually required. She called her mother. Mama. I need to tell you everything. For the first time in 18 months, she did. When she finished, Eloan was quiet for a long moment. This man, her mother said. Dashiell. Yes. He's going to do this. All of it. He's going to do all of it. Another silence. Harlow, her mother said. Her voice had changed. Something had uncurled in it, slow and careful, like an animal that has been waiting a long time to stop waiting. Tell me what you need from me. Dashiell testified on December 9th. The hearing room had the weight of a place that knows it matters, wood-paneled walls, high ceilings, the particular stillness of institutional significance. He sat at the long table and looked out at the committee members and, for the first time in 15 years, he did not calculate what they needed from him. He just told them the truth. Harlow was not in the hearing room. She watched it on her phone in the staff break room at the Sovereign, her break, 10 minutes, the same break she took every day at the same time. Marin was beside her. Dashiell answered every question without deflection. When the committee pressed on Kong Meridian's financials, he did not parry. He said, "Yes, here it is, all of it." When they asked about the infrastructure bid, he gave them the full architecture of how it had been killed, and by whom, and why, documented, authenticated, named. And then he said Crosby's name. Not in passing. Not as a footnote. He paused, looked directly at the committee chair, and he said, "A man named Darian Cross, who worked at Cartwright Capital and is currently incarcerated in Joliet Correctional, was deliberately chosen as the human anchor for this fraud. He was selected because he had no political connections, no expensive lawyers, and because the people who designed this scheme calculated that no one would look too hard at an accountant with a file that had been made to look guilty. His nickname was Cross. I am naming him on the record, by name, because naming him is the minimum that is owed to him." In the break room, Marin made a sound. Harlow had her hand pressed flat over her mouth. Her eyes were bright. Full. She was not letting it fall. Not yet. She would let it fall later, at home, in private, with nobody watching. For now, she breathed. 3 days later, Devereaux's lawyers filed a motion to exclude the recording on procedural grounds. It was denied. 2 weeks after that, the forensic authentication was entered into the appellate record. The timestamp discrepancy was certified by an independent accounting firm. Sairam Choi filed the motion to vacate. The judge granted it in January. Crosby was released on a Thursday morning in February, standing outside the Joliet facility doors in civilian clothes that were slightly too big, blinking at a sky he hadn't seen uncaged in 18 months. Harlow and Eloan were in the parking lot. He saw them and stopped walking for 1 second. Then he crossed the distance and held on to his mother for a very long time. On the drive back, Crosby looked out the window at things, highway signs, billboards, a gas station, with the expression of a man relearning the existence of ordinary life. "Tell me what happened," he said. "All of it." Harlow told him. The lobby. The ramekin. The 47 seconds in the corridor. The restaurant on Wabash. The man at her kitchen table who made tea. The Devereaux meeting in the hotel dining room. The testimony. When she finished, Crosby was quiet. "A hotel waitress saved me," he said. "A hotel waitress," she agreed. He leaned forward and put his hand on her shoulder. "How'd you know to trust him?" She thought about it. "I knew what he needed and what I needed were the same thing," she said. "And I knew he had a wound that was shaped like this situation. People with wounds like that, they don't go halfway." She paused. "And he stood up when I walked into a room. Every single time. That's a small thing. But small things that are consistent, those are who people actually are." Crosby was quiet for a moment. "You love him," he said. She kept her eyes on the highway. "I don't know what I am yet," she said. "Yes you do," he said. "You're just giving yourself permission slowly. That's fine. Take your time." She didn't see Dashiell for 3 weeks after the testimony. Dawn sent professional updates, the committee outcome, the penalty structure, the bid resubmission timeline. All correct. All appropriate. She understood the distance. There was a difference between a shared fight and what came after. Shared fights created intimacy out of necessity. What came after required a different decision, a deliberate one, made without the urgency that had been holding them together. She went back to work. Pressed her uniform. Caught the 5:45 a.m. bus. Moved through the Sovereign's amber corridors. Except the corridors felt different now. Not the marble. Not the chandeliers. Not the lilies. Her. She was different now. She knew what she had held. She knew what holding it had cost and what it had saved. And she knew, in the particular way that you know things that have been earned rather than told, that invisibility was no longer something that was happening to her. It was something she had chosen to leave. He came back on a Wednesday. Not for a summit. Not for a meeting. He came in through the front entrance at 2:18 p.m. with nothing in his hands and no security visible, which meant Sullivan was somewhere she couldn't see. He asked for Harlow at the front desk. Marin, passing, said, "I'll find her." Harlow found him in the lobby. Not the mezzanine. Not the side table. He was standing in the main lobby, near the east console, the one where the orchids bloomed over the spot where a small black recorder had been waiting under the marble edge. He was looking up at the chandeliers. She stood a few feet away and waited. He said, without turning, she would have loved this building. "Ga," she said. She had a thing for chandeliers. He was still looking up. She used to drag me into hotel lobbies just to look up. She said chandelier designers were the only architects who understood that beauty was supposed to be impractical. A long pause. "I have never stood in this lobby and looked up. In 3 years of coming here for summits, I have never once looked up." Harlow looked up. The chandeliers were extraordinary. They were the size of small planets and they burned amber and they made the whole space feel like being inside a held breath. She looked back at him. He had turned. He was looking at her now with the full, undefended look, no suit, no armor, no composed exterior managing the space between them. Just his face, and what was in it, and the decision to let her see it. "I've been trying to figure out the right way to say this," he said. "I don't have one." "Then say it wrong," she said. He almost smiled. "I want to show you the South Side proposal," he said. "The full one. Not because I need your strategic read, though I do. But because I want to show you what GA didn't get to see. What Crosby didn't get to see. What I'm trying to build in their names." He stopped. "And I want to show it to you specifically. Not anyone else. You." She held his gaze. "Dashiell," she said quietly. "I know," he said. "I know what I'm asking. I know the gap between who we are and what that means and all the reasons." "I wasn't going to say no," she said. He went still. "I was going to say," she took a breath. "I was going to say that I've been pressing my uniform every morning for 2 years. Same time. Same routine. Making myself exact so I could exist in rooms that weren't built for me." She looked at him steadily. "You are the first person in 2 years who has watched me do my job and seen me doing it. Not performing it. Doing it." A pause. "That is not a small thing." Something cracked open in his face. Not dramatically. Not with tears or declarations. Just, something went out of it, and something else came in. The particular expression of a person who has been carrying a thing alone for so long that they have stopped noticing the weight, and then someone offers to share it, and the weight becomes suddenly visible and almost unbearable in its relief. "The recorder," he said. "What about it? When you said check your pocket, you said it like you already knew I'd find it. You said it and walked away without looking back." He looked at her. "You've been doing that your whole life. Doing the right thing and walking away without looking for credit. Without checking if anyone noticed." "Someone usually doesn't," she said. "I noticed," he said. "I noticed from the first second in this lobby." He paused. "I don't want you to walk away without looking back anymore. I want you to look back. I want to be the reason you look back." The lobby moved around them. Guests with their rolling luggage. Staff with their clipboards and trays. The ambient sound of the sovereign doing what the sovereign always did, being a world that power moved through without stopping. Harlow looked at this man who had stood in Senate testimony and said her brother's name. Who had pressed his hand against his pocket in the window of his suite and felt the weight of what she'd kept safe for 3 days. Who had told her about a 26-year-old woman who pressed her uniform for a day she didn't reach. "Buy me coffee," she said. "Not hotel coffee. The place on Wabash. Now. I have 40 minutes before my next section." 40 minutes, he said. All right. She turned toward the staff corridor to tell Marin she was taking her break early. She stopped. She turned back. She looked at him. He was still standing there by the east console, under the chandeliers, looking at her. She had never looked back before. She looked back. "Come on, then," she said. And she waited for him to walk through the lobby beside her, which he did, not behind her, not ahead, but beside, two people moving through a marble room that reflected everything, together, not invisible, not small, not furniture in someone else's world. Themselves. 6 months later, the South Side infrastructure proposal was approved. A Wednesday. 10:17 a.m. Harlow was on the mezzanine level, folding linen, when her phone buzzed. One word, approved. She stood still for a moment. Then she folded the linen. Then she went to the east wing staircase, the quiet one, the service one, and she sat on the top step and let herself feel the full weight of it. 18 months of Crosby in Joliet. The years of a low and careful hoping on ice. The night she sat on her kitchen floor after Bowden made tea. The 47 seconds in the corridor when she pressed a recorder flat against her ribs and walked out. She thought about G.A., who pressed her uniform for a day she didn't reach. She thought about Dashiell, who had finally looked up at the chandeliers. She pressed her back against the wall and breathed until the feeling moved through her. Then she stood up, straightened her jacket, and went back to work. That evening, the Sovereign Hotel had a small private gathering on the mezzanine, nothing on the public calendar, just a dinner for 12. Harlow was working the room when Crosby arrived. He'd been hired 3 months prior by Ronan's Legal Analysis Division, not charity. Sairam Choi had been emphatic that it was a merit hire, his accounting credentials were exceptional, and he walked into the Sovereign in a new suit that finally fit, with the particular gait of someone who has remembered how to take the full step. He looked up at the chandeliers. He looked exactly like Harlow when she'd looked up. She was carrying a tray of champagne flutes across the mezzanine when she saw him do it, and something cracked open in her chest, quietly, privately, and she let it. Dashiell was already at the table. He saw Harlow see Crosby. He didn't say anything. He just watched her face, the way it moved through something private and enormous and settled into something that was simply and undeniably joy. Later, when the dinner had moved into its relaxed third hour and Harlow was collecting glasses near the window, he appeared beside her. Close. The way he'd been standing beside her for 6 months now, not in front of her, not behind, beside. "He looks like you," he said quietly. "Everyone says that. He has your thing." "What thing?" "He walks into a room and sees it. All of it. Before he says anything." She looked at her brother across the mezzanine, laughing too loud at something Dawn had said, exactly the way she'd always laughed. "That's not me," she said. "That's just our family." Dashiell was quiet for a moment. "I know," he said. "That's what I meant." Down on the south side, 12 blocks were being redrawn. Transit lines. Housing units. A community health corridor. And a small groundbreaking ceremony at the site of the facility that had been on a grant extension for 3 years, a ribbon cutting, modest, attended by aldermen and neighborhood residents and one Korean man in a navy suit who had driven there alone and stood at the back of the crowd. He was standing behind everyone when a small girl, maybe 7, tugged on his jacket. She held up a ribbon from the ceremony. "Red. For you," she said. He took it. He stood in the back of that crowd on the south side, a red ribbon in his hand, and he looked at the building that was about to exist where before there had been nothing, and he thought about G.A. Not with the old grief, though the old grief was there. With something new beside it. "Look what we built," he thought. "Look what we built in your name." Some things do not resolve cleanly. Devereaux's civil liability litigation would take another 18 months to work through the courts. The Kong Meridian restructuring penalties were real and significant and would take years to absorb. The gray territory of a business built between two worlds does not become simply light overnight. But other things. Other things were already done. Crosby was home. Eloan was sleeping. A community health facility was under construction on the south side. And every morning at 5:30 a.m., in an apartment in Rogers Park, a woman pressed her uniform flat. The same as always. And completely different. Because now she did it knowing that the rooms she walked through were not rooms she had to earn the right to occupy. She had never needed to earn it. She had always belonged there. She just had to keep reminding herself, and then, for a while, she didn't. On a Saturday in March, Dashiell took her to see the proposal drawings. Not in an office. He'd had them printed, large format, spread across the restaurant table on Wabash where they'd had every conversation that mattered, the same restaurant where an old woman brought tea without being asked. Harlow sat across from him and leaned over the drawings. She said, "The transit stops are wrong." He looked up. The two southern stops are positioned to serve people driving to the transit. Nobody in those blocks drives. They're positioned for people who don't live there. She pointed. Move them here, and you serve the actual density. He looked at the drawing. Then he looked at her. How do you know that? I grew up 6 blocks from here, she said. I know where people walk. He pulled a pen from his jacket. Show me, he said. She took the pen. She leaned over the map of the south side, the map of the neighborhood that had been promised something and had it taken, and she began to mark it with what she knew. The places people actually walked. The gaps in the grid. The 12 blocks that were about to be, finally, what they were always supposed to be. She handed the pen back. He looked at her markings. Then he looked at her. You saved a recorder, he said. And redirected a transit plan. All in a day's work, she said. He did not look away. Harlow. Yes. Thank you. Not thank you for the recorder. Not thank you for the testimony. The particular thank you that has no object, that means, thank you for being exactly who you are, in exactly the way you were, at exactly the moment that required it. She held his gaze. Check your pocket, she said softly. He looked confused for exactly 1 second. Then he reached into his jacket pocket. His fingers found a small red ribbon, the one from the groundbreaking ceremony, which she had taken from his coat pocket when he wasn't looking last week and returned to him now, through the method he should have recognized by this point. He looked at the ribbon. He looked at her. And he laughed. Not the ghost of a smile. Not the suggestion of warmth. A real, full, completely unguarded laugh, the kind that G.A. apparently had, the kind that was embarrassing in restaurants, the kind that meant something had broken open and the right thing was coming through. The Sovereign Hotel's amber chandeliers burned. They had always burned. They would always burn, above the marble floors and the brass planters and the navy-uniformed staff moving through the grand rooms like the invisible infrastructure of someone else's world. But the marble floors reflect everything. And if you looked, if you were the kind of person who paid attention to things most people set down and walked past, you would have seen, in the reflection of those floors, 2 people walking out of a restaurant on Wabash together on a March Saturday. A Korean man in a dark jacket. A black woman who had learned that pressing her uniform flat every morning was not armor. Was not performing. Was intention. The intention of a woman who had decided, 2 years ago, that she belonged in any room she chose to enter. And who had finally, found someone else in the room who agreed. 6 months after the groundbreaking ceremony, the community health facility opened. It was a Thursday. The ribbon cutting was attended by aldermen, residents, a dozen community organizations, a documentary crew, and one elderly woman who had been taking 2 buses to the nearest clinic for 11 years and who cried when the doors opened, which made everyone else cry too. On a shelf just inside the entrance, not prominently displayed, just present, the way significant things often are, was a small framed photograph. A young Korean woman in a hotel staff uniform. Laughing too loud. Beside the photograph, a small black voice recorder. Beside the recorder, a red ribbon. A small handwritten card below it said, "For the people who were careful and honest and saw what rooms needed. We built this in your name." Dashiell was at the restaurant on Wabash at 10 p.m. the night before the Senate hearing. He had told Dawn he was going for a walk. He had walked to Wabash. He was not surprised when Harlow was already there. She was in her off-duty clothes. Tea in front of her. The old woman had brought it without being asked, as always. "You didn't have to come," he said. "You didn't have to come either," she said. "Yet here we both are." He sat across from her. "Tell me about GA, she said. "Something good. Something that makes you laugh when you remember it." He looked at her. "Something that makes me laugh." "Yes." He thought for a moment. "She won an argument with a hotel concierge in Vancouver," he said. She was 19. He insisted the restaurant she wanted to try was fully booked for 3 weeks. She spent 45 minutes proving, using the hotel's own event calendar and the maximum occupancy regulations of the dining room, that they were overclaiming reservations. A pause. "She got a table for 2 and ate alone and called me to report every item she ordered." Harlow smiled. "She sounds like someone who read every briefing." "Every briefing," he said. She read every briefing. They sat in the warm quiet of the restaurant on Wabash, the night before the most significant testimony of his life, and they talked about a young woman who pressed her uniform and argued with concierges and laughed too loud, until it was very late. When Harlow finally stood to leave, she said, "You're going to be all right tomorrow." "How do you know?" She put on her coat. "Because you're not going for yourself anymore," she said. "People who go for themselves get scared when they reach the table. People who go for someone else," she buttoned the top button. "They just tell the truth." 3 months after the resolution, Marin handed in her resignation. Not in distress. With a folder, which she placed on Blair Ashworth's desk, which she told Harlow was deeply satisfying. She was opening her own event coordination business, small, boutique, built on the understanding that the people who made events run were the same people who'd never been asked to attend them. Her first client was Kong Meridian's Southside Community Outreach Division. Her second client was a wedding she found through a referral from Dawn. Her third client was Harlow, for a small dinner she was organizing for 8 people, because Eloan had said she wanted to meet everybody and she wanted to be cooked for properly, and Harlow had said, "Mama, I can cook for," and Eloan had said, "I know you can cook, I want to be a guest, let me be a guest for once in this family," so. Marin coordinated the dinner. It was the best dinner any of them had ever attended. Eloan made Dashiell try 3 different desserts and told him honestly which one he liked best after observing his expressions, which he found deeply accurate. Crosby, who had met Dashiell twice before, spent 40 minutes grilling him in Korean that Dashiell had to work harder than expected to keep up with, having not spoken pure Korean in a relaxed setting in years. When Harlow came in from the kitchen and saw the two of them laughing together over something she hadn't caught, she stood in the doorway for a moment. She pressed her hand flat against the doorframe. Breathed. "Look," she thought. "Look at this room. If this story sat in your chest in a way that stories sometimes do, the kind that feels less like entertainment and more like something you needed to hear, then hit that like button. Not for the numbers. For Crosby. For Eloan. For GA, who pressed her uniform for a day she didn't reach, and for every person who has been careful and honest in a world that rewarded neither. Tell me your moment. Was it Harlow catching the ramekin without looking, the first second when you knew who she was? Was it Dashiell saying GA would have liked you, and everything that contained? Was it Bowden's teacup in the sink, and the 30 seconds on the kitchen floor that came after? Or was it Crosby, outside those doors in February, in clothes that were slightly too big, blinking at an uncaged sky? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. And here is your question. Have you ever held something important for someone who didn't know you were holding it? Have you ever been the person in the room doing the invisible, essential, necessary thing, and had no one notice? Tell me that story. Your version of check your pocket. I want to hear it. One more thing. Should we follow Crosby next? Because a man who walked out of Joliet and found out his sister had changed the city while he was inside, that man is carrying his own story. And I have a feeling about the attorney who filed his motion to vacate. The one named Sairam Choi, who argued 5 wrongful conviction cases in 8 years and never took a corporate client in her life. I think those two have something to say to each other. You decide. See you in the next one.